All right, there we go. All right, welcome. We're going to be talking today about the NAR settlement and what I see as some opportunities for agents when you kind of start peeling things back and taking a peek. And so I'm pretty excited to share that with you and give you a couple of ideas you may be able to run with. What we're going to do today is I'm going to walk through two ideas, one for buyers and that buyer agent fee. I think that's the big one. And then we're going to also talk about an opportunity for listing agents and potentially doubling income. I think you should be paying attention to as we move forward and kind of how they play out. I'm going to give you a little slide presentation, probably going to take about 20, 25 minutes. And then we're going to open up for Q&A and some masterminding afterwards. So that should be a little more enjoyable. And so I want you to, by the way, write down your questions as we're going through this, write down any thoughts you have, any challenges you have that you would like to get some solutions for. And we'll put it out to the mastermind and see if we can't get that addressed. All right, and what else was I going to tell you? Oh, I think that something you should keep in mind, as you know, this has been a very stressful week. It came out last Friday, and here we are this Friday trying to figure everything out. And I think that something that may buoy you a little bit is to remember you have 4 million reasons to be optimistic. Okay, 4 million reasons to be optimistic. That's the number of transactions that happen each year in the United States on the residential side in a low market. Okay, that number goes up when the market heats up. So 4 million is kind of the baseline of the number of transactions that occur. And so that actually means 4 million sell sides, 4 million buy sides, 8 million opportunities or sides to help people out every single year. And those people need someone to help them. So no matter what we do on our side, no matter what pops out of this or things that change in the future, they're going to continue to need our help. That's the thing you should remember. And so because of that, there's going to be a drive for us to come up with creative solutions to make this work for everybody. All right, what I'm going to do right now, and I'm going to go through again 2 presentations. They're little mini presentations, and that'll probably take about 20 minutes. And then we're going to open up for Q&A, so be prepared for that. I'm going to share my screen. Just want to make sure, yep, got that done. And let's see, we got a share screen going here now. And there you go. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. I'm going to pop this open a little bigger. Give me a thumbs up. Hey, Jim, I can see you. Can you see my screen? All right, cool. Thank you. All right, and I'm going to try to move this a little bit out of the way. Hopefully it's not going to mess up on the slide recording, but if it does, it does. We're going to go through it. All right, so here we go. So this is in fact, I think what I'll do, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the recording right. Oops, I just took it off. Hold on just a second. There we go. And what I want to do is take this thing out of the way. Hold on. I know if I don't do this, the recording is going to come out really messed up. So I'm going to hide this. There we go. And then I'm going to hide that. Boom. All right, cool. Now we should get a nice clean recording for everybody checking the look afterwards. All right, so we got this this little proposal here from NAR, and it's a settlement. Keep in mind, it is a proposal, it hasn't gone through, it's not effective yet, but they must think it is because they've given this out to us. It came out in March of 2024, just last week. Here's something I want to walk through, and that is a buyer agent fee solution. So the biggest challenge I see is on the buyer agent side and how they're going to get paid their fee. Let's walk through a solution. First, I'm going to give you a couple. I'm going to go through this really fast, by the way, so we can get to the good stuff. But let's do a disclosure. This presentation is only for educational purposes and not legal advice. This is just a thought exercise to stimulate potential solutions. You should seek advice from your broker and/or attorney before attempting any of these ideas. Make sure you're complying with your state laws and rules. These are just my opinions, not legal advice or thoughts. All right, and anyone else who makes a comment, I agree. The same thing for you. We're just talking, we're just chatting, we're just trying to figure some ideas out. All right, so let's walk through the problem. The problem is that NAR put out this, has come to an agreement because they got sued and they're trying to settle out. They put out a fact sheet that you can pick up at this link. And if you just go into Google and you type in NAR settlement fact sheet, you're going to be able to find this document. It's a 4-page document. I read through there and I just pulled out two of the items that really stood out to me as being the biggest issues. Number one, this is right out of their statement. NAR has agreed to put in place a new rule prohibiting, limiting offers of compensation on the MLS, and the change is going to go into effect mid-July of 2024 is their guess. That's when they think the judge will approve it and it goes through. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but that's kind of what they're lining up on. The big deal here is, again, the prohibiting, the non-allowing the offers of compensation on the MLS. They're going to allow it elsewhere, but not on the MLS. But that effectively changes the game here. And next, the other thing I think is important is they wrote that the settlement provides that the MLS participants working with buyers must enter into a written representation agreement with those buyers before touring a home. If you haven't been doing that, you're going to need to start. Is a percentage of people already out there doing it, and you'll have to do that. And that's going to go into effect July of 2024. I'll just tell you that I've been in the business 30 years, since 1993 here in Colorado. And we've had this, I just came in 93, which happened to be the year that we brought in buyer agency here. And so I've always done one of these agreements before I brought a buyer out. It's not that difficult. You just need to learn how to change your strategy and your concept to make that work. All right, this is a proposed settlement. The terms may change. Let's keep going. So here are some results and complications and fee sources of what I think is going to pop out. So after the change, most listing agents are not going to negotiate a buyer agent fee into the listing agreement. Boom, boom, boom. That's a big one right there. That's going to be the big shift in our industry. Most listing agents are going to go out and just negotiate their side of the fee with the seller. And then the buyer agent's going to have to figure out how to handle things on their own. That, again, is the big shift. And so buyer agents are going to have to get their fee from, one, the buyer, paid either at closing or outside of closing, two, the listing broker, and that's going to have to be done in a separate agreement off of the MLS, or three, from the seller, negotiated at the time of offer as a term of the sale. Now, if you do any of these solutions, make sure that it's being put in writing, because you're not protected anymore from the MLS and the agreements that you have with other agents to cooperate through the MLS. So make sure that you have a written agreement each and every time you put one of these transactions together. And that should be prepared by your attorney and or your broker, providing you the documentation that, again, complies with your state. All right, so here's the solution that I think is going to come down. This is the one where your ears want to perk up. You want to start taking some notes. I think this is a solution. There are going to be a lot of solutions that come out, but I think that this is a solution that's going to solve problems across the board. Okay, you can use this every time, in my opinion, and you're going to be covered. Let's walk through it. The buyer agent commission is going to become part of the contract negotiation between the buyer and the seller. I just see that as the way it's going to play out, and that's fine. It's just going to become another term that's going to be negotiated. Here's the way I think it's going to go into the agreement. The buyer is going to instruct the seller to pay the buyer agent a sales commission of X at closing. Okay, that's the key concept of this part of the presentation. Okay, the buyer is going to instruct the seller to pay the buyer agent a sales commission of X at closing. Now, this language that I just used is not the language you're going to use in your contract. I'm not an attorney. I'm not helping you write up any language. You need to talk to your broker and or attorney to get the language and make sure that it complies with your states. But the concept is what you need to have. The concept is now that buyer is going to be responsible because you signed a buyer agency agreement with them, or whatever your agency agreement was. Like we have transaction broker, you have some type of contractual arrangement with the buyer that you're going to get compensated. You're going to do that before you show the first home. Then when you go in to negotiate the contract, you're going to have instructions from the buyer. They're going to negotiate in that the buyer is instructing the seller to pay that buyer agent a sales commission of X at closing, whatever you've agreed to with that buyer. Okay, I think that is going to be the solution that covers all situations. Now, I think it's important that when you're talking to your broker and you're talking to your lawyer, like if you're the broker and you're trying to put this together, that you're probably going to need to incorporate the word sales commission or talk to a mortgage broker, because this is going to become very important, because this solves the problem. I've heard of a solution saying, hey, use the buyer's use the seller concessions, to pay for the buyer agent. It's possible that you could do that. The problem is then you've used up all the seller concessions that the buyer would have used to purchase the home, and it could harm their financing, especially for a newer buyer that needs to get those concessions in order to make the transaction work. By labeling it as a sales commission, I believe that lenders are going to then accept that as that was what was already happening before. It was part of the commission side of the transaction, and therefore it won't affect the seller concessions that the buyer may need. So that's why I kind of think that this needs to be played out with your broker. You're going to probably have your lender in there and get involved. As we move forward over the next couple of weeks, the language is going to get worked out. But this is what I think is going to happen as a simple solution. Now, this all is going to be done inside the purchase contract and the additional provisions, or whatever your state is calling it. I think initially it's going to be a contract addendum, right? Your broker or the broker's attorney or your attorney, you're going to write up an addendum that you're just going to put into every contract that basically says, again, this first statement up here, that the buyer instructs the seller to pay the buyer agent a sales commission back to closing. Now, again, the language will be different, but the concept will be there. In fact, it'll probably end up being a paragraph because you want to cover all of the loopholes or challenges or issues that you could foresee, and then they come up in the future. So initially, it's probably going to be a contract addendum, and then it's going to go into additional provisions. And I believe eventually it's going to be then formalized into the standard contracts in your area, depending on how that happens. For instance, in my area in Colorado, the state does it. So the state of Colorado has the real estate commission, and they provide standard forms for all of us here. Some areas I know they get it from their MLS, their realtor association, or even their brokerage. So depending on what happens, you're going to see these things play out. And since it's national, we're going to be experimenting all over the place nationally. And so we're in Colorado, we may learn things from you in New York or Texas or California or Oklahoma or Oregon, or we're all going to learn together. So however this plays out, it's probably going to be quick. Now, I did something to try to help with this concept on the buyer agent side. I drew up just a quick diagram because I'm visual. So I wanted to kind of see what this looks like. So here's the old way that the buyer agent got paid by the listing broker, old way being before the NAR settlement. And that is the seller would pay their seller's broker X amount of money at the closing. Then the seller's broker would turn around and pay the buyer's broker some portion of that. Now, I know it may have been split out differently on the settlement statement, but conceptually, that's what was going on. All right, the new way is it's going to look like this. All right, we're going to have the same players. We've got the seller, the seller's broker, the buyer broker, and the buyer. What's going to happen in this situation is the seller is going to go ahead and pay their seller's broker just that listing fee at the closing. Now, the buyer broker is sitting there thinking, well, wait, where's my check? So the buyer broker is going to turn to the buyer and say, hey, pay me. And the buyer is going to say, oh, yeah, remember in the contract, we negotiated this. So seller, hey, pay my buyer broker. And that, again, was all negotiated in at the beginning in that purchase contract. And so while they're sitting at the closing table, the seller then is going to pay that buyer's broker. It's going to be coming out of those seller's proceeds, just like it always has. I think what's going to happen is it's just the instructions are going to be changed. So you're going to have to negotiate your fee up front with the buyer, and you're going to have to put that into a contract. So you got to now decide what you're going to do there. And then once that's in place, you're going to then negotiate this. I think this is going to play out, that this is what's going to happen. I hear a lot of arguments. Oh, well, the seller's not going to pay anything. Yes, they will. They want their home sold. You can say a lot of things until you're in the heat of the moment. You're like, well, if there's 15 contracts, I understand all kinds of weird things can happen when markets heat up. Think about the opposite, though. As the market slows down, if you're the only buyer that shows up and it's been 3 months, I think the seller's talking to you and your buyer, and they're going to work with you a lot, right? So these things are going to modify and change as the market does. But I think conceptually, this is probably the simplest solution moving forward. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead now, and that concludes the buyer side. I want to show you something else. If I can open it up, there we go. I'm going to show you a seller presentation, and then we're going to go into the Q&A. So hold on to your questions just for one more second, and then we're going to hop into it. All right, so this is what I see happening on the seller agent side. I think there's a huge opportunity here for you to actually double your fee and your fee income. So let's walk through that. Now I've got the same disclosures as before, so we're going to go ahead and cruise through that. It's the same problem that we had before, so we're going to cruise through that. Here's what I see happening as the result of this settlement on the overall picture, and then we'll talk again about that listing agent. So after the change, most listing agents are not going to negotiate the buyer agent fee into the listing agreement. If they can go to a seller and say, half of what they used to say, they're going to be doing that, okay? Because it's more beneficial for them to get that listing quicker. Now that's going to eliminate over time, but initially they're going to do it because then they can get hired faster over someone who's trying to negotiate both parts in. Therefore, I think most listing agents will reduce their listing commission fee to just that listing side. I think that's going to be the first result. The second result, after the change, buyer agents must have a buyer sign a buyer agency agreement or some kind of relationship, working relationship agreement before they can show any of the homes. And I think there's going to be a little bit of kickback. I agree with that. There is going to be some kickback, and many buyers are not going to be signing it because either was not explained well to them, they don't understand it. And so you're going to have to, by the way, get really good about your presentation to the buyer of what the value is you bring, and then this agreement that you're going to ask them to sign. All right. So I think that there are going to be buyers that don't sign, and they don't want to be obligated to pay that buyer's agent, even with everything explained, and they're going to fight it, and they're going to go directly to the listing agent. So instead of signing a buyer agency with a buyer agent, many buyers are going to go direct to that listing agent, and the listing agent will then treat the buyer, depending on however you set this up. They're going to treat them as either a customer, where there's no agency relationship, or if you practice dual agency in your state, there's 8 states, I think, that don't. The rest of the states may. I'm not sure. Here in Colorado, we used to do dual agency all the way back in '93, and it went away a few years back because there were too many lawsuits. But we also have transaction brokerage, or you may call it something different. You will need to establish that with this buyer who comes in on your listing, decide how you're going to work with them, make your disclosure, and get an agreement written up. Now, here's the big risk that people have brought up, or the big challenge. If you're the listing agent, you're going to be working both sides at that point. You're going to work with the seller and the buyer. Here's the problem. Are you only going to get paid for one side, that listing fee, because that's what you wrote up in your agreement? So you're basically earning half the commission you would have earned before, but you're doing twice the work for the same amount of pay. That could be a frustration if you don't plan this out. You could get stuck in that position. So that's why we're going to walk through the solution. And I believe the solution to this is a variable commission structure in the listing agreement with the seller. And let's walk through what it might look like. The first option, you're going to have options through the agreement. And again, get the language from your broker and attorney, but this is the concept. If the seller is the procuring cause, we'll come all the way back to that term we learned way back in real estate school, the procuring cause, the person who finds the buyer and is the reason that the buyer ends up purchasing and closing on the property, then the commission is X. And when you say the seller is going to do this, that happens, right? The seller starts talking to their friends and family, and somebody says, well, wow, I want to buy your house. I didn't know you were putting it up for sale. Oh, we'll come talk to my agent, and they'll put up the paperwork and we'll do it. So you may have a rate for doing that, okay? Next, you're going to have a second option where the listing agent is the procuring cause. You're the one that brought the buyer in through your efforts, and then the commission is going to be, let's say, 2x or whatever you're going to negotiate. So that because you're doing the both sides, you're doing the listing side and the buy side. In that situation, you're going to double the listing agent compensation. I don't know if you've ever done what we call a double in transaction. They're fun. They're simple. As far as because you're the intermediary handling that, and it actually does happen. And it actually goes pretty smooth. In my peak year, where I sold 113 homes, I actually double-ended 25% of my own listings, and I was pretty listing heavy. So it's definitely possible. You just need full disclosure, of course, like always, and make sure everybody knows what's going on. But then you get double the income, what you would have received if you were just handling the listing side. So I think that's a really big opportunity there. Next is the third option. If a buyer agent other than the listing agent is the procuring cause, then the commission is X to the listing agent. And then the buyer's agent commission is going to be negotiated and paid either by the buyer, the seller, or some combination. Again, that'll be through contract negotiation. Now, this may reduce the seller's overall cost versus the old way. If, for instance, the buyer is picking up some of their own agent's commission, as an example. All right. So let me walk you through with some numbers. And again, commissions are completely negotiable. We're just doing this for educational purposes. But here's an example. If a seller is the procuring cause, the commission is 10%. If the listing agent is the procuring cause, the commission is 20%. If another agent is the procuring cause, the listing agent receives the 10% commission, and the buyer agent's commission is going to be paid by either the seller or the buyer, or both through negotiation. Now, the nice thing about setting it up as a variable commission structure is this gives everyone an incentive to go out and find a buyer. And that's how you're going to promote it to the seller when you get into the seller and the listing presentation is, hey, by structuring it this way, you're going to get the best of all worlds. If you find the buyer, fantastic. If I find the buyer, awesome. If another agent finds the buyer, great. Either way, we're covered on all these situations. And we all now have an incentive to go out there and make sure that the buyer shows up and we close this transaction for you. All right, so that's the way I see that playing out. Here's how I think that you should set this up. By the way, I'm almost done, so be sure to prepare your questions. Here's how I think you can set this up, a path that you can take on the listing side. Here we go. Listing agent has an incentive to find and work with the buyer, okay, because you're going to make that double commission. So you want to set this up. Number one, you need to predetermine how you're going to double in the transaction. Basically, you got to decide what is the working relationship and agency disclosure. You're going to figure out that agency side of this thing. How are you working with the seller? How are you working with the buyer? What does that happen when you're doing both sides? I want you to start thinking about doing both sides. How do I prep that from the beginning before I even get involved in the transaction so it goes smoothly? All right, that's number one. Number two is the listing presentation itself to share with the seller. And you, by the way, also have a buyer presentation. I guess I should have written that in. But in the listing presentation, you're going to have a variable commission and their options. You're going to have that all listed out and explained in detail. You're going to have to anticipate what their questions are. And then when their questions do pop up, I want you to go in there and write them down so you're addressing them in your next presentation. All right. Then finally, we're going to have next, we're going to have a listing agreement. You're going to have this all prepped before you go out to meet with the seller. And it's going to have the variable commission options already pre-filled into either your contract, your additional provisions, or some addendum, depending on how your contract is. You'll figure it out, but it needs to be all addressed in there with the seller before you get started. Next, you're going to market the home with an eye towards buyer lead generation. Okay, you're basically going to go back to the 1950s, where the 1950s, all the listing agents, they went and found the buyer themselves. There was no co-op, right? So they had to figure out, how am I going to go out there and find a buyer? And an example is the mega open house, right? You're putting on a big open house, you're trying to pull in buyers, you're trying to find people. In this new world, there's going to be a lot of buyers that are more open to working directly with the listing broker. That's just going to be a reality of it. And so as the listing agent, you should be thinking about, how can I attract those buyers? How can I then go through a process of qualifying them, bringing them in, do full disclosure, and put the transaction together in one way or the other, okay? That you've got to start walking through these steps in your head so that it plays out well for you. In the marketing, make sure that there is a way for that buyer to get back in touch with you. I say that because there's so much that the prior system we've been in, it was so efficient. It was so amazingly efficient. That's why I'm sorry, I'm going to go on a tangent. I think it was so dumb for all this to happen. I'm sure you do too, because we had such an amazingly efficient market, and everybody's going to find out how efficient it was when it starts to become inefficient over the next couple of years. But that's another story. For us, we have to be practical and keep moving forward. So in your property marketing, make sure that buyer can contact you, because in the past, sometimes as listing agents, we didn't make it so easy to get a hold of us, right? We made our phone number small. We actually didn't really want to talk to the buyers if you were a really heavy listing agent. And now we got to address that, all right? So make sure that they are able to get into you. And then the last part here is, be ready to show your listings or refer to an agent who can for a referral fee. So again, you need to have a process all set up to qualify those buyers before you actually show them a property. And obviously the presentation That's another time. All right, here I'm going to show you this last part here. This is just a visual. Again, I like visuals. So here's the old way that we were doing things. We had a seller side commission, we had a buyer side commission, we had a seller's agent and a buyer's agent. And when we got to the closing, seller side commission went to the seller's agent and the buyer side commission went to the buyer's agent. Made sense. And now the new way that I see this happening, where you have the big opportunity and what's going to happen more frequently, is where we have a seller side commission, a buyer side commission for doing that work, working with the buyer in one capacity or the other. We have the seller's agent. The seller's agent is going to get the seller's side commission, but when they double in, they're also going to pull in the buyer side commission. I think that number is going to go up. And that's why I'm making this presentation, so you can prepare for that situation. All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop this sharing of the screens. There we go. And I'm going to open up to gallery so I can see everybody. Cool. And how did we do? Oh, we made it in 30 minutes. That's awesome. All right. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to open up for some Q&A, comments, thoughts, struggles. What are we all dealing with that we would like to get out there? First, let's do it with a little bit of structure. What thoughts do you have on that buyer agent side? The buyer agent fee, the buyer agent commission. I gave you an idea how I think we can solve the solution of it not being listed in the MLS anymore. Okay, what are your thoughts on that? Go ahead and unmute yourself and let me know what you think. Or maybe we've got so many, we have to raise hands. We'll go ahead and just do the unmute thing for now. And then if it gets crazy, we'll do a raise hand. But let's just unmute.
Hey, Mike, I got a question, and it's more just the screen wasn't up there long enough. It's your 1 through 6 of a seller agent.
Sure.
Can you throw that back up on the screen real quick?
Gotcha. Let me get back there. And oops, let's go right back. Can I get it to go back? Oh, it was going.
Yep, you can. Good job. Yeah, that's the one.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm glad that that's helpful. Yeah, I'll leave that up there while we're chatting. Did you have any questions about it? Did you just want to see it, want to screenshot it?
Yeah, mine is not really a question. You're saying it a little different than, I think you're with EXP than our broker is, kind of shared in that big meeting. And, I don't know. I think on us selling agents or listing agents rather, I think that we need to be incredibly diligent about it's going to be a negotiated number, at least for the foreseeable future. I think we need to be very freaking good at that. And if we bail on that really fast, then we're bailing on our industry as a whole. And I think we need to be better than that. And someone mentioned fiduciary. It is very important. And that's what we need to rely on. And listen, seller, if you want true fiduciary, then you need to let that buyer have representation. And you know what? It's going to be negotiated in this contract, and let's just be prepared for it. I think we need to be better as listing agents, not less better. Because that's an easier listing that you described, Mike. That's an easier listing appointment. Sure, yeah, let's not pay anybody. Let's go ahead and just negotiate my contract and then throw these what ifs in there. And if we immediately go to that, you're right. I mean, there's going to be.
I think we are going to go immediately to that because of competition. Because one agent's going to come in and say, hey, I'm going to do it. And the public doesn't understand everything. And so they're going to just see that you're asking for, I'm going to give my numbers that I used earlier. You're asking for 20% and the other agent's saying 10, and they can do simple math in their head. They're going to go, well, that's half. And so I'll just do the one that said 10. And that's going to happen. You're going to get burned a couple times, and then you're going to have to adjust. And because I'm just trying to anticipate that's what's going to happen. And then you're going to have to adjust, and you're going to have to just do your listing fee and let the buyer agents start to negotiate out their fees on their side. I think that's what's going to happen. Just think about it. In July, you no longer can write in the MLS a co-op fee. And in fact, it may be earlier in some of these markets. So you need to start preparing now. If I was working with a buyer right today, tomorrow, the next day, I would immediately start writing up buyer agency agreements and get used to it. Start preparing your presentation, start writing up an agreement, start reviewing it if you haven't seen it in a while. Talk to other agents, come in here and talk to us. But I think that's what you need to do. And as a listing broker, you need to be prepared for the fact that they're going to first of all, they're going to look to you to figure out what to do. But and let me break that out real fast. I think if you're working with someone on a referral basis, like this is someone they know, like, and trust you, it's going to be a lot easier. I think referral agents are going to do much better in this transition. But if you're talking to a stranger, they're going to be probably looking at competitors. That's going to be where you're really going to have some struggles in this type of situation. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
Hey, Mike, I had a question to ask. I work with a lot of investors,
Cool.
and I'm wondering, do you see any way that there might be, I know it's common for listing agents to charge a non-refundable marketing fee, but do you see that ever coming on the buyer side where before I take on an investor, they would, pay a marketing fee on non-refundable and then they could maybe get reimbursed upon sale?
That's a great question. Is it Mansell?
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. Hey, Mansell. Um, I think that it depends on your area, right? That's the other issue, is that every contract in every state is different, and in fact, in every area. So they may call it something different, but in my area, we call it a retainer fee. All right. So we actually have had that in a buyer agency agreement for the last 30 years. It's called a retainer fee. And so you can just go in there. That's why, if you don't get anything else out of this, I highly, highly, highly recommend you do what brand new agents should do. Go read your listing agreement straight top to bottom 10 times. Read the buyer agency agreement top to bottom 10 times. I'm telling you, that's how I became an expert in that, is I just had to go through the hard head banging of reading that terrible language top to bottom. I got so good, I could flip it around and I could tell everybody, my client, exactly what was in every single paragraph. And you need to be that good, because if you did that, you would know whether your buyer agency agreement does have a retainer fee or not. Is it just a check box and you're going to write it in, or is it something you're going to have to write into additional provisions? So for instance, do you know the answer to that question?
I do not.
Okay, good. And thank you for being honest. Most of us don't, or we forgot, right? And so you need to really go in there. You're going to have to become a pro. Your level of expertise is now going to have to rise. But you should be excited about this, because it's not going to take that much to be so much better than the competition, because a whole bunch of people are going to just cower, go in the corner, and they're going to quit. And that's good for the rest of us that are willing to work hard and make this transition happen, right? So go in your buyer agency agreement and read down through it. Now, again, you may have different relationships to working with a buyer in your area. So I recommend you read all of them. Read the buyer agency agreement. If you have a thing called transaction brokerage, which we have here, have the customer agreement. Yeah, the customer is when you have non-agency. I've heard other states call it a non-agency agreement, right? And we call it working with a customer. So you go through there as versus a client. Go through there and read that agreement. Get that in your head of what the terms are, because you're going to have to start explaining these to people, right? And you want to get so good that you can just whip this thing around and explain every part. You're going to start hearing objections. You write down the objections, so the next time you're able to handle the presentation better. Okay. But great question. I think you can do that with investors. I think you can do that with regular buyers, etc. Now, whether they'll accept that, whether the market will accept that, I don't know. I know one thing: if you don't ask, you ain't getting it. All right.
Mike,
Well, yes.
hello.
Hey,
Um,
Lisa.
hi, I have a question, and bear with me with the language of it. So I'm in the Salem, Mass area, and a number of properties have just come on the market in the last couple of days, and the buyer compensation is business as it has been. Should we start having conversations with our sellers about all of this? Because I feel that if we don't let them know the options, then things are gonna be, official, and this is how it is, and they're gonna come back to us and say, hey, you didn't tell me that I, wasn't obligated to pay X to a buyer agent. I could have paid less or nothing. So that's where I'm stuck. I know we're talking about buyers, but also sellers. So does that make sense? I hope everyone.
That's great. And by the way, we should open this up to work talking about buyers, sellers, anything that's popping up. We should just do that and get it out of the way. By the way, I'll be here and talk to you as long as it takes to get through all of our questions. So I don't have any time limit on this thing. If you got questions, write them down. Let's get it addressed and help each other out. I bet you already know the answer to the question, Lisa, because you said it in your statement. And that is, communication is key. It's always
Right.
been key with our clients. And so I think it's a really smart idea to bring it up because the public is hearing this stuff. I mean, oh my gosh, they're getting bombarded with it left and right, right?
Yeah.
If they haven't brought it up to you already, it's because they're already thinking about it. And they're just the kind of person that's not bringing it up. I would address it, be forward, and I would call them up and say, hey, the key here is this is a proposed change. Nothing has changed yet. This is a proposed change. Nothing has changed yet. You got to start the conversation there. I just wanted to let you know that things may change in our industry and it may affect the sale of your home. And so I wanted to talk with you. Do you have a couple of minutes? Yeah. Okay, cool. And again, this is a proposed, I would say it like 28 times. I want them to get the idea it's not official yet. But I would just say, hey, this is the way we were currently moving through the market. Things may change in July or later. We don't know because things have to be changed by the court, the DOJ, the industry. We don't know, but this thing has really moved to the forefront. And I want you to know that this is the way I see this thing playing out. What do you think? That's the other thing, is ask a lot of questions to them. What do you think? How do you see this playing out? Maybe they have an opinion. Okay, maybe they want to share with you what they're thinking about this. Get a dialogue going. The more you do that, the better off you are. And it's really a great, I love how you brought this up, Lisa, because it's so good for us to hear what the public is thinking. We have to be able to know what they're thinking, and that way we can create a better presentation. We can deal with objections better. All an objection is somebody is confused, right? We just want to help them get through, and so they have a clear understanding, and then we can all move forward or not, but at least everybody understands what's going on. So it's a great question, Lisa. Did that help?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
You betcha. Anybody else have any advice for anything we've talked about so far or another issue? Again, I want to have the dialogue of a mastermind. We got so many brilliant people here. If you got something to throw in, please unmute yourself and throw in.
Mike, I have a question.
Yes.
Debbie,
Debbie. Hey, Debbie.
hi. A lot of my buyers are with VA loans, and the VA doesn't allow compensation. How are we going to, or how is a solution to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer yet. My guess is the VA, remember, it's just proposed right now, so you can continue to do business as usual up through July. I think between now and July, what are we sitting in March? So we got April, May, June, July. We're talking almost 4 months. I think in that time, if the DOJ gets involved and they say, yeah, this is going to go through, we're going to make this the rule of the land. I don't know if it's law of land, but whatever. If they're going to make it official in our industry, the lenders are going to adjust, because lenders want loans to go through, don't they? I mean, that's how they get paid. They're struggling right now too, trying to figure out what they're supposed to do. So my guess is that VA will make a new rule change on that particular item. I mean, they just make a rule change tomorrow, and there it is. So they can make a rule change about buyers paying their buyer agent. You could have same kind of issues with Fannie and Freddie. They're going to be trying to solve these problems. That's on the conventional side. HUD with the FHA loans. All these lenders are going to try to figure out a solution. And my guess is there's going to be some lender who just comes right out of the gate going, hey, I got a great answer to this. Here it is. Boom, use my loan. Right? Because they're going to look at it as a competitive advantage, just like you're trying to figure out, how can I turn this thing around into a competitive advantage?
Hi, Mike. This is Terry.
Sure, Terry, go ahead.
So I'm in Minnesota, and we've had a buyer's representation form for as long as I've been in real estate, and it's quite good. All the issues that you have are part of that buyer's representation. You know, all your solutions are kind of like packed in there. The only thing is that we won't have it on the MLS anymore. But the one thing that gets me is that the commission paid by a seller has always been negotiable. Now, you might be with a company that wants to get 6%, but that doesn't mean, but that seller still has a right to say, I don't want to pay 2.7%, and the same thing with the buyer's broker. The commission is negotiable. Everything is negotiable. And I think that we as realtors have forgotten that. And it's just like you're saying, set up all of the avenues you can make, either as a facilitator, you're going to go a la carte, this, and this. That's your right to do so. you know? And I think that we as realtors are forgetting the power of negotiation. And that's
You
just
betcha, Terry. I love that you brought that up. I'm going to give my opinion, and anybody else who wants to chime in again, please do. Uh, Commissions that have always been negotiated. I don't know if you've been around a long time like me. I've charged a lot of different rates out there in the market based on what the property was, the situation was, if I really wanted the property or not, and how much marketing I thought I was going to have to do. I've had a lot of different rates I've charged, and I bet most of you have as well. So that's number one. Number two, I want to just throw this out on negotiation. As you're going to start negotiating more with your client, and that's going to be on, again, the sell side and the buy side, to set your rate of compensation. Your broker is going to probably give you some guidance, but they're getting kind of handcuffed here too. So I just want to put this out. On negotiation, there are two parties to the negotiation, right? The client and you in this situation. The two parties can each set whatever boundaries they want to that negotiation. What I mean by that is, just because the other party wants you to work for free doesn't mean you have to work for free. Okay, it's a negotiation. If you run into one of these people who say, I want you to do it for free, Mike. Okay, tell you what, I want 500%. You want to start super low, I'm going to start super high, right? And then maybe we'll come into some reasonable number. And by the way, when you're making presentations and negotiations, exaggeration helps a lot. Okay, in my experience, if you really blow it, like I went to 500%, who's going to pay 500% commission? Right, that's insane, right? But it got in their head that this thing could go the other way too, and you're going to then come to some reasonable number in the middle if you end up in a negotiation. The other thing I'll tell you, after listing, and I never really added up, maybe 1,000 homes, most people are not going to negotiate with you. They're just looking at what you present and they're saying yes or no. Okay, I mean, I don't know how if anybody, like, how many times have you gone into a listing presentation and the seller's just beating you up and beating you up and beating you up on the commission rate? It was extremely rare in my experience. If you create a really great presentation and you show your value and then you show your commission, they're going to either say yes or no. That's usually what I experienced. I didn't usually get them saying, oh, I want you to do it for $2. I don't know. Anybody else get that? Have that situation? What do you think?
Mike, I have a question.
Yes, fire away. Al. Hey, Al.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you show me the last sheet on your presentation? I couldn't see it. You move it quite quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was trying to go really fast so we can talk. And Al, when you say the last sheet, are you talking about the diagram or are you talking about the 6 items?
Not the 6 items, the one in yellow that you were having, the seller, the buyer.
You bet. I'm going to pop it up and then you tell me if it's the right page that you wanted to look at. Ready?
Okay.
Okay, so this was the double listing. This was on the listing side. And then we had this was on the seller side or the listing side. Is this the one you wanted to look at?
Yeah.
Or was it the one on the buyer side?
This one.
This one? Cool.
This one. Yeah.
I'm going to leave that up there for 60 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. And let's go and let's keep going. Anybody else have any other questions, comments, issues, concerns, burning challenges?
Mike, I got one. This is KC.
Hey, Casey, good to hear you.
Thanks, Mike. Good to see you. Great presentation, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I'm gathering as much as I can to put a video together myself for my sphere and public. So I'm just trying to take it all in, and I know a lot of information's still coming in. But have you heard any rumblings at all about NAR or anybody else asking for some congressional intervention on this thing in terms of putting some laws together that'll help iron out all these choppy waters that have been created by the lawsuit?
That's a great question. That is a fantastic question, Casey. First of all, I'll tell you, I've not heard anything. I'm not that well connected. So if you have or anybody else has, please let us know. You would think with all the influence that NAR has had in Congress over the years, that something there might be a Hail Mary out there. It's a good point. I don't know if it'll happen because the Congress is so divided right now, but it is an interesting thought that either Congress or one of the governing bodies of some type, one of the agencies out there has some influence on this. I don't know what it would be, Federal Trade Commission or something. I don't know. Somebody might get involved. I haven't heard anything. Have you heard anything, Casey?
I have not, and but if I do, and I'm like I said, I'm doing a lot of research now for this video, so that's one of the questions I'll be asking around.
That is a fantastic question. And if anybody else on the call has any headwind, any ideas that they've heard, even a rumor about the government stepping in one way or the other to put their finger on the scale, that would be interesting to hear. I'll just point this out. A lot of people I've heard in comments and seen, they say, hey, let's get rid of NAR. They're dirty, rotten scoundrels, you know. And NAR is the only reason that we have any power or influence at all on a national level, and in particular with Congress. So although I got to say, I do not agree with a lot of what NAR does and haven't over the years. I think they made a lot of dumb mistakes in the early days with giving away realtor.com and allowing access to the MLS and other things, but it doesn't matter. In general, it's phenomenal because that's the only way we have any power or influence, because little individuals like me or KC standing around, Congress is not going to listen to us. So anyway, hopefully we got this screen so now I can see everybody's face again. But thank you, Casey. That was a good point. Anybody have any insight on whether Congress is going to get involved?
I don't anticipate they'll get involved prior to things going into effect, but again, just maybe to smooth out the waters, because there's going to be so much confusion. The consumer's the one that's getting hurt by this.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you that this is completely going to backfire on everybody, and mainly, in my opinion, I come from the economics side. That was my undergrad degree and really loved economics, but I believe that it's going to create an inefficient market. And because the inefficient market, things are going to happen that people don't like. Sellers aren't going to have their homes sold as fast as they used to. They're not going to have it sold for as much as they want. The buyers are going to get burned because they're not going to have as many opportunities to see as many homes, not have as many options. The market is going to crumble a little bit as far as its efficiency. I don't think people have thought about that. Certainly the attorneys that did the lawsuit didn't think about that. All they care about is the cash, in my opinion. But we'll leave that one for another day. Getting frustrated about that, and I'm sorry I even brought everybody there. Let's stay in the solution space. I love what Casey was just talking about with creating a video to go out to his people to explain what was going on. Casey, if you don't mind. Now, Casey, if anybody doesn't know, is a longtime veteran in the industry, been a super high performer in his career. And Casey, if you could tell us what you plan on sharing with your people when it comes to this. You said you're mapping it out. Where do you kind of see that going?
Well, I just wanted, it's the same as going into a listing appointment or a buyer, first time consultation, is you want to kind of lay out the road ahead. So they're hearing all this stuff, whether it's the media or whether it's, I had a guy corner me at Big R the other day and say, oh, so the 6% commission's going away, huh? And I laughed at him. Because no, I said, no, we're still going to get paid what we're worth. So, we're not going there, but it's all this misinformation that I want to get ahead of and just let them know that, yeah, there are changes. It's complicating the way that we're doing things. It means we're going to have to put a whole lot more education, and explanation in front of you before you can go find a house or before we can put your house on the market. But we're going to do the job right and you're going to be taken care of. But just don't get caught up in the misinformation.
Good point. Yeah, I love it. I can't wait to see what you put together, Casey. If you get that done, maybe you could shoot it over to us and we'll take a quick look. And if you're okay with it, maybe we'll share with some people. I think that's a really great idea. And I love how you're experiencing the public, right? The public's reaction. And then, by the way, people, when you get into those situations, do not get defensive, okay? Try not to get defensive. Be curious about what people are thinking and how they're reacting to this. That's going to benefit you so much more than getting defensive and getting in a fight with someone. That's not going to help. Although, like when Casey was running to the guy and he said, hey, I heard the 6% commission is going away. My answer would have been, yeah, I think it's going to go to 12.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to go down, people. We don't know what's going to play out of this thing. Really, we have no idea yet. One other quick idea is a year from now, it'll be resolved. It's all going to be settled and we're going to be doing our thing, because remember the 4 million reasons. There are 4 million transactions that happen out there every single year. These people need help and assistance. It's going to be us, right? I mean, maybe some technology company tries to come in and get some influence. Good luck. Good luck. We all know there's too many little details and problems and challenges that pop up. It's a high service business. All right, let's go through. I get to see some hands raised, and I'll just help. Let's get in for Rama. Rama, do you have a question?
Good morning, Mike.
Hey, Rama.
My first point is government is not going to get involved till the election is over. Elections are more important for them. Second is, what will happen to the dual agency?
I'm sorry, to the which?
Dual agency.
Oh, dual agency. Yeah, dual agency. I don't know. It depends on your state and what happens with the play out there. In Colorado, we got rid of dual agency years ago because there were too many lawsuits. There's a lot of lawsuits in dual agent. It's very difficult to be a proper dual agent and keep changing your hat back and forth. I practiced dual agency for a long time, for over a decade, and I was able to do it. Never got sued. There was never any problem, but it is challenging. And so I'm not sure if your state currently allows dual agency, you can continue to do that. If they don't, they don't. That's kind of my answer.
California, I'm talking from California. Dual agency is allowed.
It is allowed in California, you said?
Yeah, it is allowed.
Okay, cool. Well, then you can continue to do dual agency until they change the rules. Now, that brings up a really great point, Rama, which is you got to forecast out in your mind, how are you going to be putting these double-in transactions together? Are you going to be acting as just the seller's agent and the buyer comes in and you treat them as a customer? That's what they used to do in the old days, and it worked for a long time. I mean, decades and decades and decades. You could do that. And you're putting the deal together and you're writing up the paper. Just remember, all these situations, you got to do full disclosure to both the seller and the buyer. You can handle it where you're a dual agent, if that's allowed in your state. You can handle it where you're a transaction broker, if that's something in your state. There may be other arrangements I'm not aware of. You do need to start schooling yourself in all that agency. All right, cool. Did we answer your question, Rama?
Yeah, one last question is, some brokers are advertising, we don't take any buyer agent commission. We list your house and sell the house.
That's good. That's old school. That's 1950s. And here's the problem with that. Here's the problem with that. Why the market's super hot, they may be able to pull it off like a builder does. What do builders do when the market goes down? Anybody know? Anybody been around? I know a lot of people here have been around. Those builders, they start offering massive compensation to come in and help them out, right? So the builders are a great example of how they flip-flop, right? The market's so hot, we don't want any of your agents to come around. The market slows down. Oh, please come over here. Please come over here. Anybody, we got cookies, we got party going on. Just please come over here. They'll do anything. I think you're going to see that. And these companies who may be decide, and it's their decision, they may decide not to offer compensation at all. Okay, but when their listing has been sitting there for 12 months unsold, they're going to be very frustrated very fast. But there are going to be people who experiment with that. Yeah. All right, cool.
I agree with you. Toll Brothers and NAR, I saw builders how they work. Thank you.
You bet you, Rama. Yeah. And again, that's part of this, right? Is we don't have all the answers. The market is going to play out. The beauty of America is we have this market. It's a fairly resilient market. It's efficient in its way. We got a lot of, the beauty of real estate is we've got 1 million players in the market. Agents are going to try all kinds of different experiments to figure out a solution for this. And that is good. Don't hammer them if they come up. If they say, oh, I'm only going to do it on my own and not offer any buyer agents. Okay, good. Go for it. Let me know how it works out. I hope that works out for you. Maybe they'll figure out a model that's super profitable that way. But if somebody's trying an experiment, as long as it's legal, make sure that you kind of give them a push and go, yeah, go for it. Let me know how it turns out. Because they may come up with something we never even thought about. We're very creative in America. All right, I'm going to go up to Laurie because I see her hand held.
Yeah, hi.
Hey.
I had a new listing coming today, And so I took the opportunity, I had discussed with my seller, the options in general for, like a few weeks ago, for buyer compensation. But I went into it in more detail yesterday. I called her and said, look, I don't know what you're going to be hearing out there. I just want to make sure you understand that you don't have to offer that compensation, but here's why we think you should. And she said, I don't want to get in your way. I want you to have everything you need to sell it. And yes, of course, I can see how it's going to attract buyers to have a good compensation there. It's going to attract their agents, which is going to help sell the house. So that was really nice. And I'm just wondering, we don't know, but I'm wondering, and maybe you already covered this. I got in here late when I saw your notice. I'm wondering, it won't be something we can advertise on the MLS if the seller wants to offer compensation, but will we be able to talk about it on our websites or on our property websites or anywhere else? Or is this like a secret that the seller is offering compensation we can't tell anyone?
Great question. As you know, it's all proposal. It's not in stone, any of this, until maybe July or later. We don't even know when they'll come to their final answer. But the way that it seems to be written out at this time is that you just can't put the co-op compensation in the MLS. That part's going away. You could promote it on your website. You could promote it on your T-shirt. You can do whatever you want outside of the MLS, which makes it really kind of crazy, right? This thing is so terrible, we can't have it in the MLS, but you can put it anywhere else you want.
And it seems to open us up then to the same liability of the MLS, whatever the issue really is there. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not your attorney, so I can't answer that question.
Right.
I'll just say this, I'll refer you to that settlement statement. The settlement statement said if you're, most of the realtors as individuals would be covered if that thing actually goes through to completion where your liability would be removed. And in fact, I saw a question.
Liability, for former liability was the way I read it, not for future.
Oh, that's a good point, yeah.
But I did like the idea that I saw that, and this seems workable, that the listing agent is allowed to share their commission, which is, I've been in this business 35 years. I remember, and that's really what we do now is we're sharing the commission with the buyer's agent. So I don't see how that's really any different.
Yeah, it's going to be different if they get this thing done. They are rocking the foundations with the latest change. Initially, before they came through with the last round, I didn't think it was going to change as much because they basically said they want to go from a minimum of $1 to 0 in the MLS. But by getting rid of the field, that was all in one focused central location for everybody to access. Now it's going to be very weird and awkward and strange. And I don't know. We'll just have to see how it plays out. It's a good question. Don't have an answer for you on that one.
Yeah.
The only advice I have is this: until the actual change happens, I would continue to do what you're already doing. I would be open communication with my clients like you're doing, letting them know something may be coming down the pipe. You should tell your people, this may not even happen. They may change it. Like Casey was talking about a Hail Mary coming in at the last minute from the government. I don't know. Then it just goes away. That might happen. So I wouldn't make any major rash changes yet. I would just be preparing and talking to people. But any business you get up through July, you have to go off the old model unless we get notification that something's changed.
And I so appreciate you're doing this, and I hope you're going to share the recording with us.
You betcha. As long as the recording comes out, I will.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you for your input. And again, anybody else, please chime in if you've got an answer or a question at any of these things that have popped up. All right, Bill, I see you. William, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Good to see you.
Again, appreciate your doing this.
You bet.
Yeah. So I guess just a thought. So I haven't read it. I've gotten a bunch of emails with some information, and I'm planning to read through them this weekend to get some more information. But I guess just the thing that's popping into my head is maybe just a buyer agent's welcome in, just some kind of a workaround like that, just kind of giving that subtle nudge wink that we're open.
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't know how it's going to come down. We don't know what rules the MLS will create. Keep in mind, it's still business as usual till we hit July. And by the way, just so everybody knows, we hit the top of the hour. I'm going to keep going and answering anybody's questions that has questions until we get done. So if you have questions and curiosity, you want to keep sharing, let's keep going. But to that question, that may be something you put in the MLS. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Yeah, if you have a thought, go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know. But William, yeah, did you have any more that you wanted to add to that, William? You say buyer agents welcome.
No, that's just off the top of my head. Like I said, I've been busy this week and I've gotten a whole bunch of emails, and my plan is to try to sort through the stuff this weekend. So that just popped into my head right now, and I was just wondering if, I don't know, of this proposal, what is allowed or not. Or I guess as someone had just suggested, maybe you could say listing agent will share commission, or so I guess that has to be worked out.
Area or so forth.
Yeah,
I've heard that the MLSs are starting to create rules on that, about what you can and cannot put into the private comment section that are just going out to other agents, because they've already figured out, people are trying to work around it. Remember, they don't want to get sued. They don't want to get sued again. 400 million is a lot of money. They do not want to get hit again. So they're kind of in a rock and a hard place. The jury went against them, the 8 people in Missouri, and I'm sure it was a giant shocker to them. They didn't, NAR, they didn't expect any of this. And then many of the MLSs are owned, of course, by associations or run by associations. Some are not. They're going to make some interesting decisions too, because there are some MLSs that are not connected to the Association of Realtors in your area, and they may make a different decision on this. They may not change at all, or they may change because they don't want to get sued. I don't know. You just have to kind of see how it plays out. But it was a good question. Thank you, William.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other questions, comments?
Go ahead.
I heard somebody. Go ahead, Maggie.
Yeah, hi. I wear a couple of hats. One of them is a realtor, but I also represent a moving company in Arizona. Welcome. Hi, Mike. I get your things and I go, okay, I'm going to check in on this one, because my brokerage, we're all having big company meetings, right?
Sure, good.
So, this is, I don't know if I'm beating a drum, but the marketing and the verbiage and the nuances of this is extraordinarily important. I mean, this is what we've been talking about. Like, how do you not work for free? And not to go down the rabbit hole of what is the bottom line agenda and why this hugely, massively powerful lobbyist did not figure out a way to let people know that everyone here is an entrepreneur, and any interruptions is a barrier to first-time home ownership. So if I was going to put anything out there, there's lots of people here, and we're, like, well, how does one person stand up? And it's like, I don't have any power. No, yeah, we kind of do. Maybe we should all call our congressman, and maybe we should call NAR, and maybe we should get a better marketing team, because the public doesn't have a clear idea of the 185 things any realtor does to sell a house. And they think they're getting all this money for nothing. So anyhow, that's just kind of a little bit of a rant, but we have more power than we think we do. And that's why this is really important, because this is brokerages from all over the country. So Mike, I don't know, I'm words are powerful. And if we got 3 months to throw a Hail Mary, let's get somebody in there that knows what they're doing in terms of saying, hey, your realtor is your neighbor. Your realtor is paying your taxes in your neighborhood. The commissions or whatever, the earnings that your realtor gets, et cetera, et cetera. Enough said, but I don't know. Okay, I'm available for hire, but I'm $7,000 an hour. I'm teasing with you guys, but I'm just saying the obvious is so often overlooked. And I think that our community as realtors has to go to NRA and say, hey, come on. Anyhow, NAR, not NAR, but NAR, not NRA.
It's a good point, and you should certainly hope for that. I don't think it's a bad idea to call up your congressman, Maggie. Thank you for presenting that. Um, and if you think that that will have some influence, I think that's great. And maybe it will. I think we have to prepare on all situations. Like I've been doing business, I've been an entrepreneur, I've had 11 different companies. So I basically love A, B, right? I try to go for option A, and that's where I'm going, but I always have a backup plan, a plan B. And so I think that's the way you need to look at this is, hey, I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing, but my plan B is I got to go on this other track, and I got to get this thing set up right now, because I don't get to decide whether this thing is happening or not, but I'm going to make sure that it works out because I want my people to be taken care of, right? My past clients, my sphere of influence, my friends, my family. And I think, as I mentioned in the beginning, if you're a referral agent, you're going to have that influence with them. And as I think Maggie brought up a great point, we need to make sure that we are presenting what we're doing for people better. I used to have a giant listing packet, but I don't know what everybody else does. And I would literally walk them through everything that was going on. I remember a trainer I followed early on said, hey, do a 5-minute listing presentation, get in and out really fast, get them signed really fast. And I did that. I went into a listing, got them signed really fast. And then I was dealing for weeks after that, trying to get all the backfill. And I just spent so much time. I realized that was a mistake. I would just take all the time up front necessary to make sure they got all the information. I don't care if it was an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. I'm going to make sure they got all the information they needed. And if I did that, everything went real smooth. Okay, so our job is education with the folks, especially our friends, family, these referrals that are coming in. They're going to listen to us, and they're going to listen to what we recommend. Let me do this. I'm going to go through and just try to answer anything. I know there's a lot of comments. I got a question. If your company is not covered by the settlement, will you be covered if you move to another brokerage that is covered? I don't know the answer. That's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. Did anybody else know the answer to that? No? I'm sorry, I don't know the answer. Let's move on then. Cool. Yeah, nice comments here. And by the way, I'm just going to read through comments, but if you have something to say, go ahead and unmute yourself and say it while I'm reading through here. Same
Mike,
question.
this is Chris
Hey, Chris.
Celine with Madison, Wisconsin. Hi, how are you?
Good to hear from you.
Yeah, I enjoyed your referral agent's presentation recently and even had to buy it. I thought Vicky was especially good. I noticed she was on the call earlier. I don't know if she's still on or not, but Vicky's very, very good. I highly recommend it to everybody. Anyway, Mike, could you go back and show us your last slide about the buyer broker side? Because I think
sure
there's a lot of options for the listing agent, and I think that's pretty clear to all of us. Many of us are both listing agents and buyer agents, and I think there's going to be more challenges on the buyer side of things. And I don't mean that, I mean when you were talking in the beginning, Mike, about the buyer.
Yeah, this right here?
Yeah.
Okay, and what particular do you want me to stop at? You tell me and I'll
well, that very last, okay, go ahead here.
Right here?
No, just one more, I think.
This solution
I think
right
this, here? No, maybe you didn't even really have it. I'm just looking.
I'm just showing you, I only had a couple
Yeah,
steps. So
I'm trying to see which one.
Here's the results.
Maybe it's this one here.
Here's
yeah,
the
one
with the language and the concept.
Again, I think we need to talk about what are more solutions and suggestions for buyer agents in terms of how we'll present this to our clients and what are solutions about how buyer agents are getting paid. I mean, I'm what you call your solo agent, and so many agents though have these teams and they've got, you know, a whole bunch of buyer agents, and how are they planning on those agents being compensated? And every single transaction could be a little different. So I'm just
Chris. So you're looking for some dialogues for the buyer, working with a buyer,
right? On the buyer agent side, more specific. I know somebody else there was the one agent from Silicon Valley was hoping for some dialogues too, and I think. I mean, I don't have them all. I'm kind of putting some things together. My company we've already had some meetings like everybody else had, some Zoom calls. But I think we need more solutions for that buyer agent, because right now lenders are not going to include that because they say Fannie and Freddie Mac look at that as being like collateral.
You say that, what do you mean?
Well, what I was told, again, I'm not a mortgage broker, but what I was told is that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac do not allow the buyer agent commission to be part of the mortgage because that's looked at as the same
roll it
thing
into
like
the mortgage.
right.
Yeah,
You
some
can't work
people are
it into
thinking
the
about putting
mortgage.
it on top, like the price of the home is 100,000 and you put your commission up to 110 to cover it. But that becomes an appraisal issue and other things. But keep in mind, currently with our current model, buyer agents are receiving compensation at the closing table and lenders are okay with it,
Yeah.
right?
Mike, I am the mortgage
Say that
loan
again,
officer.
but say more about that, Mike. What when you're
Sure.
saying that?
Sure. So for the last multiple decades, buyer agents, depending on where you are in your state, where you are in the market, but you've been able, as a buyer agent, you've been able to receive your compensation at the closing table, yes?
Well, absolutely, because
And where's
that's
the compensation coming from?
well, it's because it's coming from the seller.
It isn't coming from the seller. That's becoming the challenge, right?
Well, it depending on how you word your contract. Yeah.
Yeah, see, this is a great question. And I think a lot of this, people want to know dialogues, and I think that's great. But for me, it really comes down to mental state. How do I think about something? Because if I think the process through, it's easy for me to say it to somebody. Does that make sense? So if I get a picture in my head of what it is, and I get that right, then I know that it'll come across. It's not some one fancy line. I actually understand it. So when they're dialoguing back and forth with me, I can explain it. So I'm going to go back again. A lot of people you saw 35 years and elsewhere, but I've been in the business for 30 years. And I remember when buyer agency came in. I remember the old timers being really mad about it, and it was going to replace seller sub agency, and it wasn't going to work, and the whole thing was going to crash. That's what they said. The whole thing's going to crash in a year, and it'll never play out. Well, it did play out. But I do also remember, and there's a reason to this story. I remember in our area, there was a lot of mental gymnastics going on by the real estate commission, our governing agency in the state, to try to explain how the buyer agency worked. And I'm just going to tell you the way they came down to it, because I think it's going to help when you go into this new world. The way that they justified having a buyer agent represent the buyer and get paid at the closing was, people said exactly what they're saying now, which is, well, the seller is paying it. The seller is paying it. And the real estate commission said, well, is that really true? Is it really true that the seller is paying it? Yes, it's coming out of their net proceeds, but who is actually bringing all the money to the closing? The buyer, right? The buyer is actually bringing all the money to the closing, either with their own cash or with the financing that they've gotten from the lender. But the buyer is the one bringing the money to the closing. And so the only reason the seller has any cash at all is because the buyer brought it. And therefore, the language I used is from 30 years ago. The buyer is going to instruct the seller to pay the buyer's agent. So the question is, who is actually forcing this compensation cycle to work? In our opinion, here in Colorado, it's been that the buyer is the one that's been forcing the compensation model. Now, it may have been breaking out different in your state, and maybe you have a different concept of it, but in our state, that's the way that we visualized this reason that there was a buyer agent in the transaction and how they were getting compensated, was because the buyer hired the buyer agent and the buyer instructed the seller to use the money they brought to the table to pay them. Does that make sense?
Yes. I mean, that's how it is now.
Exactly.
And
exactly. That's the way it's all played out.
Right.
And
I mean, that's how it is in my state.
Say again?
That's how it is on my state. In fact, my company, we have an addendum that we add to the contract, to the offer to purchase, that basically says that we decline the offer. We decline the seller's offer in the MLS, and we instruct the seller to pay the buyer broker base, something to that effect. I don't have it
Oh,
right in
that's
front of me.
interesting. That's very interesting, actually. Yeah.
In an addendum, yeah.
So that's the way your state has decided to come about with the language that would work for you.
Well, no, I mean, that's how my that's an addendum. It's not actually a state form.
Attorney.
It's an addendum, right, right.
Got it. Yeah, that's great.
But you're going to have people who might just, like you say, not want to offer any compensation to the buyer's agent. Sellers are going to say, no, we're just going to not do that.
If this happens the way it's going down, yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And everybody listening needs to mentally change your concept of what that means. Just imagine a world where that's true. The listing agent can no longer offer the compensation to the buyer's agent. And you say, well, maybe they'll go negotiate. So this is post NAR settlement concept here real quick. Maybe the buyer agent. The number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. I'm going to hit a mute real quick because I don't know who that is. And then when you want to get back in, be sure to mute yourself. Unmute yourself. So, sorry, that threw me off. So, I don't even know where I was. Who wants to unmute yourself and give me a little help here?
Yeah.
My brain went dead. Yeah. I'm sorry, Chris. I kind of got off track there. The buyer agent compensation, this is all going to be worked out in your area, in your state throughout time. Nothing has been changed yet. Oh, here's what I was going to say. If you were to go to your seller right now and have them negotiate, present something, let's say that let's do this. Let's do it this way. Let's say you run right up to July 15th. That's what they're kind of saying is the conversion date. And your old listing agreement, you say, hey, I'm going to pay a buyer agent. Seller agrees to pay a buyer agent through their listing agent, however your structure is. And we agree to offer the co-op compensation. Then the date hits and everything changes. Now what? Now what? Do you go back and change your listing agreement or do you leave it alone? Right? If you leave it alone, you can no longer promote that through the MLS. Now, if the agent who does bring the buyer went and negotiated a buyer agency agreement with their buyer and puts together a buyer agent fee in there, they're going to come try to negotiate it directly from the seller in the example I gave in the early part of the presentation. And now what? The seller is going to pay 3 commissions, right? Listing commission, buyer commission, plus another buyer commission. It's going to get kind of weird, isn't it? Yeah, that's going to get weird, and we're going to have to sort that out. That's why you got to start planning now. What I foresee in that situation is you're going to go back to your seller the day that it changes. You're going to say, hey, we got to change our agreement. We got to change our agreement to do blank. Because if you stayed in the old model, even if you promoted co-op compensation elsewhere off of the MLS, you're still going to run into the problem of this buyer agent who comes in with a buyer and their compensation is setting up in the new model and you're in the old model. Does that make sense? That's why I think the smart people in our business, some of the people on the call, I don't know if I'm one of them, I don't think so, but the smart people are going to figure this all out. They're going to start gaming it out in the front, and they're going to have things in place. Your broker, for example, the state or whoever the agencies are that are controlling your license, they're going to have this all sorted. So they're going to say, here's what's going to happen on the transfer date, on the change date. Here's what you're going to have to do to change your agreement with your current listings. This is how you're going to have to change your agreement with your current buyers so that it all melts together. And they're going to at least do that at the brokerage level. That's where there'll probably be some experimentation. But after a couple months, because we all work together, it's going to play out in the industry. So get ready for a bumpy ride, but be positive. Remember, the key is the connection with your client. If the client trusts you and you have a connection with the client, they're going to follow you no matter what. As long as you're communicating with them that these changes are coming down and that, what does the client want? The seller wants to sell their house and the buyer wants to buy a house. The rest of this is all noise to them. Okay. It's important to us, but quite honestly, they don't care. They just want to buy the house or sell the house. And so we got to keep on that level with them and just explain, okay, these are some little detours over here, but we're going to get you to help you either buy the house or sell the house. And we'll guide you through, we'll Sherpa, I can't say the word, Sherpa you through it. and make sure that you are guided along the path to completion. But that question was excellent. Chris was asking about dialogues with the buyer. Yeah, you're going to have to start coming up with better dialogues. And that's why you want to start thinking about, what is this going to look like? How do I see it playing out? And now I could start, writing dialogues or start practicing dialogues or whatever. For you, again, I'm going to go back to the basics. Make sure you understand your relationship on the agency, on both buyers and sellers, what it would change to or look like if you were working with both parties, and then how you can put that into a written agreement. If you walk through those exercises, the language and the scripts, I think, are going to come out because you're going to know it. You're just going to know it. And then you can say it in your words, in your language. All right, good. Other questions, comments, issues, frustrations? Let's get them out there. Let's talk.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Tony, how you doing?
Good, my friend. How are you?
Good to see you.
Good, good. I just want to mention something to you a little bit. There's been some talk. I'm in the Detroit market, and there's been some talk about about still offering out buyer compensation on the listings, but directing the people to your website. So you put in the remarks, in the agent only remarks, your website. They can go to the website, and then they can see what commission you are offering out. Which I mean, that's okay. It has the caveats like you just talked about, but they're taking it a step further and possibly implementing on the buyer agency agreement that you can actually give the buyer a choice now as to whether they would like to see homes that are offering out compensation or ones that they would be willing to cover your compensation on it. And that you can put that in writing to help to eliminate, so you're kind of got yourself covered so that you're not steering them from one house to another based upon the compensation that you get. It's their choice at that point. So I don't know how that's going to play out, but it's kind of an interesting concept that I just kind of wanted to poke out to you there, and everyone else. This is kind of let you know that's one option that they were looking at around here. So
thank you, Tony. I always love hearing from you. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I've heard that as well. Again, everybody's going to come up with their solutions. We don't know what's going to actually play out. There's going to be a lot of experimentation. But your statement was, hey, listed out in the MLS, not the fee, but hey, they refer you over to my website to see the fee. So as a buyer's agent, you're now going to have to click into the MLS. Now you're going to have to click and go look it over at a website. You're going to have to search for the property and try to find it and see if there is a compensation. Here's the problem with that, Tony. If there is a compensation listed on their website, is it legally binding?
I would not think so. You'd still want to put that in the contract.
Yeah, I don't know. See, I think a lot of agents might get burned because they saw it over on ABC Realty's website that they were paying a 28% commission, and they went and wrote the contract up, and they got to the closing and their commission's 0. And they're like, what's going on? And the company said, oh, well, we changed that on our website. There are all kinds of pitfalls and problems and challenges. But I think you nailed the answer. As you're very well an experienced agent, just make sure it's in the contract, right?
Yeah.
So make sure there's a lot of open communication, and make sure you cover yourself with written agreements.
Exactly. For sure.
Yeah, good point though. I love it because a lot of these solutions have popped up because people are trying to be creative. Like the idea of, hey, why don't you just have seller concessions cover the buyer agent fee? Well, you could do that, but then now they don't have concessions to help them with their financing, with the prepaids and expenses. So yeah, this is good stuff. What else, Tony? You got something else?
No, that was the only thing. I think you guys covered everything else that I could think of.
Cool. Let me read through, and anybody else who wants, go ahead and chime in, but I'm going to read through comments.
Mike, one question. Last person asked, consultancy fee, can we charge?
I'm sorry, say that again, Rama.
Can we charge a consultancy fee to buyers?
Yeah,
someone asked that
consultancy
question.
Fee? Yeah, I think so. You look at your agency agreements. They probably already have these things in them that you want to do, because the old timers, they were smart, right? They knew there were going to be all kinds of options, and they addressed them and put them in there. If they're not in there, they're probably going to be incorporated soon. But yeah, in our state, for both the listing side and the buy side, you can do compensation in a variety of ways. And if you don't see what you want to do, you list it out, talk to your broker first, attorney or whatever, but you just list it out. That's what I've always done. I just listed out an additional provisions or another addendum, how my compensation is going to be taken care of. So yes, you can do it as a consultant. You can do it hourly. You can do it as a flat fee. You can do it as a percentage of the sales price. You can write up, you can do it where they trade you a cow for a successful sale. I mean, you can do whatever you want. Good. All right. Anybody else? Go ahead. And I'm just going to read through comments to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Really hoping you're going to go over dialogues. Okay. And we just kind of tried to touch base on that concept. It really comes down to having the idea in your head, and then the dialogues I think are going to come out. Recording. Okay. Let's see.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Oh, you betcha. Yeah. And thank you for all the good questions. See if an agent stops representing what if the agent stops representing a buyer? So buyers are on their own and just take listings. Seller can still not negotiate the buyer agent commission. Okay, so Mary had asked earlier, way back, if Mary's even still with us, and I apologize, but I'm just starting to read through these, and Mary was basically saying, hey, why even work with a buyer at all? Why not just work with sellers? Some people will choose that. By the way, some people chose that 10, 20 years ago. I did. I was focusing almost all my energy on sellers because it attracts buyers. But yeah, that's an option that could happen. Do I think everybody's going to do that? No. See, here's the scenario. You got to start thinking real life scenario. Like I like to go back to, hey, your sister calls you up and says, hey, I need to sell my home and buy a home. Are you going to say, no, I'm not going to work with you because I only work with sellers. I only work with buyers. You're going to say, yeah, let me help you. And you're going to figure out how to get them from point A to point B, right? Let's see. Wow. It looks like there are a lot of messages. I don't know if I can read through them. If anybody's got any comments or questions, go ahead and fire away. I'm just trying to read through this stuff. Let's see. A lot of legal issues are going to crop up. Sure. We need to stop using the word commission and use the word fee. Yeah, that's an interesting comment. NAR did the blunder by doing advertisements on this issue. NAR should go away and not help realtors anymore. I understand the frustration, but I disagree with that. I think NAR is very beneficial to us over the years. If you looked at all the things they've done, professional fee, please use this and change your language now. So Don recommends calling it a professional fee rather than commission. That's an interesting one. Good. And then which buyers want to give agents prices are too high? Which buyer wants to give agents prices are too high with high interest rates? Not sure I understand that, but yes, you got to adjust to higher market, higher pricing, and whatever the interest rates do. I'm seeing this already. Going to change for showing. So looking for questions in here. Let's see. Not sure. Okay, and if you have a question, comment, issue, concern, you go ahead and fire away. Let's get it out there as I'm just kind of trying to read through here. Let's see, make us have to prove. Oh, somebody said, hey, you're going to have to prove that you're the procuring cause. Yeah, that may come up. But remember, if you're the listing agent who listed out that this is going to be a procuring cause decision, then it's like any time, if the old model or the new model deciding who the procuring cause is, easiest one is who wrote the contract. See, double ending transactions leads to more lawsuits. Unfortunately, that's true that you might get into more lawsuits because of all the double ending. Although I never got sued for double ending, I think it comes down to good communication. What else we got? Listing is the name of the game. Yep. Boy, there are a lot of comments here. If you guys wait for me to read all the comments, we're going to be a while. Anybody else have any thoughts? Okay. Looks like we're coming up to the end then. If you have any questions, anything burning that you want to talk about, please get it out there. So I just peruse down here and see if we missed anything. I just want to be here for you to answer or help. My brokerage has been letting sellers choose the VA compensation for over a year. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I'll just say this. I was helping out with somebody who was selling their home in the hot market. I actually recommended they do a much higher buyer agent compensation than is normal to attract more buyers, and it worked out beautifully. So we are going to lose that tool out of our tool belt. Yeah, and just these are mainly just comments. Almost down to the bottom. Well, somebody said put it on showing time or private remarks. Yeah. Again, these are all very creative workarounds. I like it, but my guess is they're going to eliminate any of these workarounds if it's getting around the spirit of what they're trying to do. Is framed as somebody wrote, it's amazing. This is framed as consumer protection. Got to agree. It is not. It was lawyer wealth building, in my opinion. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll find out. Let's see. You're welcome, Lou. All right. Let's see. Commission collect exactly. Boom, to boom, to boom, to boom. So there should be different moving forward. Yeah, if I'm missing your question, be sure to just unmute yourself and ask, because I'm flying through them pretty fast. Charge consulting fee. We just talked about consulting fee. So again, you can charge a lot of different fees in a lot of different ways. Look at your agreements with either the buyer or seller to see how it's already currently structured. You probably could put in what you want. And then you just want to bounce it off your broker to make sure they're okay with it. Gotcha. Cool. How's this gonna? Oh, somebody said, hey, no one's talked about how this is going to affect appraisals. Appraisers are going to have to make adjustments. I think that's a big problem. I agree with you. If one of the concepts they have is this is all going to move off of the MLS. They're going to have you're selling them on all these different websites as the tech companies try to come in. Yeah, that's going to be a problem, because then you're going to have to try to collect the data to do your CMA, and appraisers are going to have to try to collect the data to get their appraisal done. You're right, that could be a problem, and we'll just address it when it pops up. Some more exact. Boy, this was great, man. Look at all these questions. Appraisal. Yeah, so this another comment about appraisals may become very difficult. All right, so I made it through all the comments that I think that we needed to address. Anybody have anything else they want to state, ask, or present before we wrap this up? Okay. If you do, unmute yourself and let's go. I'm gonna do a mute just because I heard some background noise. But again, if you have a question, unmute yourself. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up in 60 seconds.
Mike, I do have a quick question.
Oh,
It's
hey,
and here I go. So I've got a client that are friends, and I've known them for a very long time. On Monday, I'm going over with the listing paperwork. They have to sell their home in a very short period of time. Well, get it in contract because they're building and their house is going to hit drywall within like 30 days. So we have to be in contract. They cannot close on the house until the house is, completed, which is like the end of August, beginning of September, but the builder's requiring them, to be in contract. Right now in my marketplace, all the commissions, I haven't seen anyone go to zero. I've been watching the evening news and the local news, and nobody's reporting on this. I know my clients are very, very frugal, and they will definitely, if I approach them, it's going to hurt them, because they will definitely not offer a buyer brokerage commission, which means bringing less people to the house. Since it isn't going in effect mid-July, I'm kind of torn whether or not to, let them know what's going on, because I'm afraid they're going to cut off their nose to spite their face. So what is your suggestion? I mean, I don't want to feel like if they find out, then they feel like I'm hiding it from them, but we don't know, like you said, that this is going to go into effect, or how it's going to, I mean, it is going to go into effect, but we don't know what could change.
Great question, Wendy. It's a great practical question, right? And I'm glad you're bringing this to us to kind of think about. I'll give you my thoughts, and anybody else who wants to chime in, please do. My quick thought is this. Again, I have kind of like guiding principles. And one of my guiding principles is I want to be completely open and communicate with my client. My client has hired me to take care of them and protect their interests. My client has hired me to advise them and to share all the information that's available. And my client, here's another principle I have. My client needs to make all decisions. I am here to guide them through the process. And that's my job. And I'm very good at, hey, these are the options coming up. We can go left, we can go right, we can go straight. We can even turn around. What do you want to do? And I'll map that all out for them. And then I put them on the spot and I say, what do you want to do? What is your decision? I think it's so important all throughout the transaction to do. And I think that this is another situation where you would do that. I'd say, here's the landscape the way I see it. It's very uncertain. This is a path that I'm pretty confident if you go down, you're going to have like a 98% chance of getting what you want. This is a path you could go down and, well, I don't know, maybe you can get there, but it might only be like a 48% chance that you get there. And I tell them, I'm making the numbers up. That's kind of my gut, that this is a less probability of going down this path than this path. And so which one would you like to do? And I let them decide. If they say, I don't want to offer a comp, they say, I want to offer the comp. And whatever they say, throw into the mix this. You throw into the mix the risk. They say, oh, I'm frugal, I don't want to offer it. Boom. You just say, hey, no problem. If nobody shows up and nobody wants to buy your home because you're not offering a co-op, is that okay with you? And notice how you go silent. Okay, you got to go silent and wait for the answer, because they're calculating it in their head, and then they're going to come back with the answer that works for them, right? And then another thing you can do is you can say, why don't we try your way for 2 weeks? And if we're not getting the results that you want, why don't we leave the flexibility that we can make a change or adjustment at that time, right? That's another thing you can do, is think in chunks of time, okay, for making adjustments as you're moving forward. That's a good one to use with people. Like they say, I don't want to offer anything. And you say, no problem. You got till August. You got to get this place under contract. You may have a date the lender needs it by. Split that in half and say, why don't we try it this way for X number of days? But if it doesn't work, do we agree that we'll make a switch back to this old way and try to finish it out before you lose your house, or the new house, or whatever you think the risk is? Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Wendy. I know you're going to do a great job for him. My advice, though, is just always be open with them, because your own personal reasons, you're going to feel, hey, I'm honest, I'm straightforward, I'm not hiding anything. It's so hard to try to remember, if you had hid something from someone. So just tell them what you know. All right, good. Let's see, what else do we have? Why did God invent lawyers? That's funny, Rob. Real estate agents would have someone to look at. Oh, wow. It was a joke. I don't know if I'll repeat it. It was pretty funny. Rob said, hey, why did God invent lawyers? And the answer is so that real estate agents would have someone to look down on. That's pretty funny. Anyway, I think that lawyers are valuable and beneficial, just like all professions, just like our profession. We've got some great agents and we got some bad ones. We got some great lawyers out there and we got some that aren't so good. So, all right, good. Do we have anybody else that wants to throw out a question, comment, issue before we wrap up? I'll give you 60 seconds and then we'll do that. Just unmute yourself and let us know what you think. All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I hope this has been valuable and helpful to you. Got a couple ideas, shared some frustrations. Probably do this more often as we're moving forward. Just stay open-minded, okay? Stay curious. Stay in a solution-oriented space. And I think this is going to work out well for you. Again, thank you again for your time today. And we'll try to get if this thing does record, we'll try to get the replay out there for everyone. But I do appreciate you all being here and participating today. All right, take care. Keep moving forward. Bye for now.